Attorneys will be given the option, do you want the jurors polled individually? Most likely, whoever loses will say, yes, they do want that to take place. And the jurors will one by one get up and say, yes, indeed, that is how I voted in this process. On the last 4 alcohol charges, they also have a lesser to consider. They could find him not guilty of providing alcohol to molest, but guilty of providing alcohol, which is a misdemeanor charge, meaning Jackson would most likely still be out on bail. Okay. Jury is coming in, I'm being told. The jury is now coming in. The judge wanted the alternates to be here as well, 4 men and 4 women that sat through the trial. The alternates are coming in with the 12 panelists, and presumably now within the minute, we should start to hear this audio feed from inside the courtroom.
Jeffrey, these 8 women and 4 men, the jury and the alternates, there was 1 black alternate, but no blacks on the jury. Did anyone make a big issue out of the fact that there were no blacks on the jury?
Well, Jesse Jackson, who's been a sometime spokesman for Michael Jackson, has raised that issue. Interestingly, if 1 juror had left, the African-American alternate, I believe, was alternate number 1, so he would have joined the jury, but no jurors left, so it is a jury without any African-Americans. In this area, that is not all that unusual. This is less than 2% African-American, this part of Santa Barbara County. This is a city of 70,000 people. Very few African-Americans live there. Many Hispanics live there, but not many African-Americans. So it is not all that out of the ordinary to have a jury without African-Americans.
Is there a heavy police presence, more robust, shall we say, Ted, today than has been the case over these many weeks of this trial?
Wolf, I've just been told the jury is seated, and they are now awaiting for Judge Rodney Melville to enter the courtroom. And at that moment, we should be able to hear this audio feed coming through. The jury, again, is seated, now waiting for the judge to walk into the courtroom to start the proceedings.
All right, we will await, and hopefully that audio signal will work. We'll be able to hear the voice from Judge Rodney Melville give the last bit of instruction as the jury verdict is read to us, to the entire world, all those people who are watching and listening right now. I was asking if the police presence today, Ted, is a lot heavier than it is on a normal day of this trial.
Judge is on the bench. Wolf, the judge is on the bench.
All right.
The judge is on the bench. And we are now waiting for this feed. If it doesn't come through, we have somebody who's monitoring this, and they're telling us via radio the judge is on the bench, and the feed should be coming at any minute. I just heard something in my ear click. I'm assuming that that may be the beginning of this audio feed.
Well, we're letting our viewers know exactly what we know, and hopefully they will get the audio feed exactly as we get it. And we're not getting it yet, so maybe the court has not yet flipped that switch so that we can hear the voice of the judge. Ted, tell us what your producers on the scene are telling you.
I got it. Oh. They are telling us that the judge is on the bench. He's got a radio, and the verdict has now been handed to the judge. The judge will look over the verdict to his left so that they can be read by the court clerk, Lorna Fry, who sits directly to the judge's left. As you're looking, facing him from the courtroom. We have been told that the judge has the verdicts in hand and is looking them over right now, but obviously we are not hearing the audio feed coming from inside the courtroom. However, we will get the verdicts as they are read via two-way radio, and I will pass along the verdicts one by one with each count as we get them over the radio.
All right, we're going to stand by, and hopefully within the next few seconds we'll begin to hear the voice of the clerk and or the judge as the verdicts in the Michael Jackson trial are read inside this courthouse in Santa Maria, California. These are crowds that have gathered outside the courthouse getting ready. They're anxious to hear as well whether or not Michael Jackson will be convicted or acquitted in this child molestation trial. It's been 14 weeks in the making. The jury has met for 7 days, 32 hours if you're counting, of actual deliberation before reaching the verdict. About 95 or so minutes ago, when we received word from the court that the jury has reached a verdict. and would be announced within 60 minutes, but it's actually taken a little bit more than an hour and a half. Given the long ride from Neverland to the courthouse, it took a little bit longer than presumably the judge had wanted, but all is well that ends well in this particular regard, not necessarily, Jeffrey Toobin, a big deal that it's 30 minutes later than the judge may have wanted.
This has actually worked fairly smoothly in terms of getting them there, but so far the audio system at least either hasn't been turned on or it's not working.
Any new word yet you're getting yet on what's going on, Ted?
No, Wolf, I'm looking at Peter Ornstein, our producer. He has both radios pressed up against his ear, waiting for an update. There are 10 separate counts, so there are a lot of forms that the judge will have to look through before he hands them over to the clerk. Presumably, the judge is still checking those out. Again, I just heard an attempt, it sounded like, for the audio feed to kick in. However, nothing at this point. We're still waiting. What's that? Judge is still reading the verdicts, I'm being told. The judge is still reading over the verdict forms. And the courtroom, I'm being told, is absolutely silent, which pretty much mirrors what's happening outside the courthouse. It is absolutely silent out here as everybody waits for word to see which way this jury has decided in terms of Michael Jackson's fate. The judge will, when he's finished looking at these verdicts, hand them to the clerk, and at that point we'll either get the feed or we will pass it along to you via the radio, real time. We have somebody who has visual and has audio from a feed room, which is around the backside of the courthouse, and that individual will pass it along to us over the radio, if need be.
How extraordinary, Jeffrey, is the way this judge, Judge Rodney Melville, has orchestrated the release of the information and the verdict. How unusual is this, what we're seeing? Obviously, this is a high-profile celebrity case, but still.
I've never seen a judge allow a partial audio broadcast. I mean, this is without precedent. It was designed to avoid the confusion that we had in the Martha Stewart case, where there was no audio feed, and people came running out of the courtroom with signals that some were right, some were wrong. The idea is give everyone the information at the same time, avoid that confusion, and we'll see if it works.
Bob Shapiro, if you're still awaiting, still can hear us, Bob Shapiro, the criminal defense attorney who represented O.J. Simpson in his trial 10 years ago, how extraordinary is this procedure that Judge Melville has worked out?
It's totally unique, and as Jeff pointed out, in these high-profile cases, one thing you always hear, and that is from the prosecutors, that the cases aren't going to be tried any differently, and the judges would like you to have that same impression. Nothing could be further from the truth. These cases have their own unique attributes. Everybody views them differently, and I think the judge has made a good decision here in releasing the verdicts. I actually would have preferred to have those verdicts read with a camera in the courtroom on the clerk.
We can assume, Bob Shapiro, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no hung jury. They've reached a verdict on all 10 counts.
It's not we can assume, we know. They have announced that they have reached a verdict. They buzzed the judge, and they have one buzz if they have a verdict, two buzzes if they have a question. So clearly, if the reports have been accurate, there was one buzz and a verdict will be read on each and every count.
One thing that was very unusual about this jury deliberation is that the questions that the jury had, and there were some questions, and the readbacks that took place were not released to the public. And I think, frankly, that's a very disturbing development for those of us who believe in public trials. And this is the first trial I have ever heard of where jury questions were not released to the public.
Would they be released after the verdicts are announced?
Perhaps, presumably, but since they've never not been released before, I don't know what procedure the judge plans to use. But, I mean, again, I think it's an example of how these high-profile trials develop their own codes, their own laws, and
California, how extraordinary is this? The fact that we were not told what the questions were, Bob Shapiro?
Yeah, it's not, I don't find it that extraordinary at all. Generally, what happens is when the jury has a question, the judge calls both lawyers in and they read the question. And it may be, can you give us a better definition? Usually the response is, follow the instructions that you've already been given. It's a time for people to try to be fair, but it is also a give and take session. And so those kinds of things generally are off the record. I don't see any problem with it. If there is a read back, they could announce what was read back, and I agree with Jeff on that issue.
And Bob Shapiro, we're told by Ted Rollins and our producers on the ground who are inside that courtroom listening to what's going on as we await the audio from the court clerk and from the judge on the verdict, 10 counts involving this child molestation trial against Michael Jackson. As the judge is now going through the paperwork, reading the verdict, studying them, does he have any discretion if, let's say he has a question and he's confused, could he tell the jury, you know what, I want to take a break and let's review something, or must he go forward now, Bob Shapiro, and have the verdicts announced?
Wolf, that's a very, very good question. If there are inaccuracies, or if there are clear mistakes in the verdict form, or if there are special allegations that the jurors have to render a decision on and they haven't filled out the verdict forms properly, he will instruct the jury to go back and do them properly. However, he cannot change anything that this jury has done at this point in time. If there is a conviction, he could do it later.
Another unusual aspect of this deliberation is that the judge has not released the exact verdict form that the jury is filling out. Again, that's usually the case in high-profile trials where there's interest in a verdict form. For reasons that are, frankly, inexplicable to me, this judge has not released the precise form that the jury will be checking the boxes in, so we don't know precisely how the verdict will be announced.
Bob Shapiro, here we go. Here's the audio. Let's listen.
Superior Court of the State of California for the County of Santa Barbara, Santa Maria Division. The people of the State of California, plaintiff versus Michael Joe Jackson, defendant. Case number 1133603. Count 1, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of conspiracy as charged in count 1 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 2, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 2 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 3, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 3 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 4, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 4 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 5, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 5 of the indictment, dated June 10th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 6, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of attempting to commit a lewd act upon a minor child as charged in count 6 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 7, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 7 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 7, verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 7 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 8, verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 8 of the indictment, dated June 13th, 2005, foreperson number 80. Count 8 verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense that charged in count 8 of the indictment, dated June 13, 2005, for person number 80. Count 9 verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 9 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, for person number 80. Count 9 verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 9 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, for person number 80. Count 10 verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of administering an intoxicating agent to assist in the commission of a felony as charged in count 10 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, for person number 80. Count 10 verdict, lesser offense. We, the jury, in the above entitled case, find the defendant not guilty of providing alcoholic beverages to persons under the age of 21, a lesser included offense of that charge in count 10 of the indictment, dated June 10, 2005, for person number 80.
That completes the reading of the verdicts, and we're going to go off the air.
And there it is, all 10 counts, not guilty on all 10 counts. Michael Jackson will be walking out of this courtroom a free man, not guilty on the more serious charges, the lesser charges, administering alcohol, a misdemeanor, a slam dunk against the prosecution. Jeffrey Toobin, I think it's fair to say a lot of people are going to be very, very surprised.
A lot of people are going to be surprised, and you don't need a law degree to understand this verdict. It is an absolute and complete victory for Michael Jackson, utter humiliation and defeat for Thomas Snedden, the district attorney, who has been pursuing Michael Jackson for more than a decade, who brought a case that was not, it was not one that this jury bought at all. And this one's over.
We said before the verdict that California juries are unpredictable, Bob Shapiro. In this particular case, a lot of people thought Michael Jackson would be convicted at least on the misdemeanors. A lot of people thought he'd be convicted on the more serious felony counts, the sexual assault, if you will. Give us your immediate reaction.
Well, first, the jury did not come up with a compromise verdict, which a lot of people would suspect if they just wanted to give the prosecution something. The jury clearly has told the prosecution this was a case you probably should not have brought. The little boy's credibility was probably non-existent to this jury, coupled with the mother who offered testimony that bordered on the bizarre, that this is a case that they didn't want to show guilt by association. They did follow the judge's instructions clearly on the prior bad acts by not using that as a way to show he committed this particular crime. And my hope is that the public accepts this verdict. This is a jury in a very, very conservative part of California, a jury that by all markings look like a pro-prosecution jury. And if this jury had no doubt, none of us should have any doubt whatsoever.
You personally, though, are pretty surprised, Bob Shapiro. You thought this was perhaps going to go the other way.
I certainly did. And I didn't think Michael would be singing Beat It. Now he's going to be doing the moonwalk.
He's not only going to be doing the moonwalk, he's going to be coming out. He might jump on top. All of a sudden, his health, I suspect, Jeffrey Toobin, is going to get a lot better very, very quickly. Ted Rowlands, let's bring you in. You've been covering this trial from day one. We see a lot of people cheering, a lot of happy Jackson fans out there. Set the scene for us.
Well, when the first verdict was read, they cheered, then immediately they quieted down to hear the next, and it went through all 10. Clearly now it's pandemonium out here among the crowd members. They are jubilant. Inside the courtroom, we understand from our producer, Michael Jackson dabbed his eyes with Kleenex during the reading of the verdict, and now you can see the SUVs are pulling up, and Michael Jackson will be getting inside one of those vehicles and heading to wherever he wants. He is not guilty and has to answer to nobody. He has been found unanimously not guilty by this jury, and this crowd that is gathered outside could not be more pleased. 90% of them Jackson supporters.
Are there arrangements? Is there a microphone set up outside the courthouse there where you are, Ted Rowlands, for if Michael Jackson wants to make a statement to his fans, if his attorneys want to speak, if the prosecution wants to speak, or if the jury wants to speak? We're standing by for all of that if it happens. What's the arrangement that's been worked out?
We have been given permission from the court to set up interview rooms inside the courthouse for defense lawyers, prosecutors, Michael Jackson, and jury members. It will be up to those individuals whether or not they want to make a statement. We were told that Michael Jackson would be at least reading a statement. We have to wait to see whether or not that comes to fruition. The vans are out here. He could leave at any minute. We will not be able to stick a microphone out to get any audio from Jackson, impromptu audio, as he's leaving, because sheriff deputies have lined the space between the media and the vans. We will not most definitely be able to get to Michael Jackson. Security is extremely high here, but we do expect a statement from Michael Jackson in this prearranged scenario. Whether or not he's up to it or wants to do it at this time, we'll have to wait here and see, but everything is in place for all of the parties to make statements now here in the next few minutes.
What are you hearing from our producers inside? Ted Rowlands, what's happening right now? And just to recap, for viewers who may just be tuning in, not guilty, all 10 counts against Michael Jackson, a clear and decisive unanimous win for Michael Jackson against these charges. What's happening inside the courtroom right now?
What we've been told as far as inside the courtroom is only that Michael Jackson dabbed his eyes. We have not gotten another update since then. The judge is now addressing the jurors, thanking them for their service. He has not adjourned court yet, so all of the parties are still inside court, listening to Judge Rodney Melville basically button up this case, thank jurors for their service, and then allow everybody to go their separate ways. So right now, the judge still holding court, saying goodbye to all of the parties inside the courtroom.
All right, Ted, I'm going to ask you to get some more information, what's happening inside. Let me bring Jeffrey Toobin, our senior legal analyst, back into this. This is clearly everything that Michael Jackson, Thomas Mesereau's attorney, all of the family members, the fans, wanted plus.
Absolutely. And you know, I think a lot of people watching this verdict, especially people who didn't follow the trial very closely, will be tempted to say, look, another crazy California jury acquitting an obviously guilty person. Many people regard that as happening in O.J. Simpson, Robert Blake last year. Whatever you think of those other verdicts, this was a very different case. This was a questionable case. This was a difficult case for the prosecution. I think one issue that the prosecution will really have difficulty answering is why did they bring that count one? Because the count one was a very weak count in and of itself, but it also allowed the defense to put forth the conspiracy theory that the jury obviously believed, that this case was orchestrated by the accuser's mother, that the mother put the son up to lying about what happened. If these prosecutors had not charged that conspiracy, the mother wouldn't even have been a witness in this case, and it would have just been the accuser testifying, and I think the prosecutors would have had a lot better chance of winning.
What happens now, Bob Shapiro? Does Michael Jackson and his attorneys, can they take legal action against the accuser, the accuser's mother, the accuser's supporters right now for if they decide they want to keep this issue going?
No, they are finished. They are not going to bring any further action whatsoever. They want this thing to go away, to fade away, and not be heard from again. I wanted to just touch on one thing that Jeffrey so accurately pointed out, and that is by bringing up count 1 as the most serious charge being the first count. And allowing...
Let me just repeat what that count was. Conspiracy to commit child abduction, false imprisonment, and extortion, as we see people leaving the courtroom where the judge has now dismissed the jury. Go ahead, Bob.
The jury clearly would find that that was overreaching. This case never was about extortion. This case was about one issue and one issue only, and that is, was this little boy molested or not molested by Michael Jackson? The jury has spoken loud and clear. And it goes back to one thing that I have said in these cases over and over again, that defense lawyers don't win these cases, prosecutors lose them.
And when you say prosecutors lose them, give us a specific. What did the prosecutor do wrong in this particular case? Here he is, Michael Jackson. Here he is. Michael Jackson is walking out of the courtroom right now. We see him. There's a little bit of a smile there. I suppose he's as stunned as a lot of other people are, surrounded by his father and his sister and other family members walking out. No visible emotion there, Jeffrey. Did you see some visible emotion on his face?
Not at that moment. He did look stunned and exhausted, and much like he has throughout the trial, just drained and physically ill, frankly.
And we see his attorney, criminal defense attorney, the white-haired man, Thomas Mesereau, walking out. There's the family. Let's listen in to see if we can hear anything.
Mr. Mesereau, reaction.
He's inside his SUV now. His supporters, his family members hugging each other. Michael Jackson blew a kiss or two to his fans. He could hear the cheering as he was walking out. Thomas Mesereau, his attorney, staying behind together with his legal team. Michael Jackson, not guilty, all 10 counts that were brought against him. He clearly didn't make a statement on this particular occasion. Perhaps he'll be making a statement once he returns to his Neverland Ranch, another 45-minute or so drive from here. We'll be standing by to hear if Thomas Mesereau, his attorney, will be making a statement, and if the prosecution will be making a statement. Ted Rowlands, you're there. Give us a little bit more.
Well, Wolf, Rusty Dornan, my colleague, was inside the courtroom when these verdicts were read outside. The vans are now leaving. The fans chasing the caravan down the street. Take us through what happened, Rusty.
Absolutely incredible, as it always is, as you know, in those courtrooms. You could not hear a sound in the courtroom as the judge was ripping open each of the verdict messages, because he had to look at them first before he had the clerk read them. And the only sound in the courtroom you could hear was the tearing of these envelopes. Meantime, I was sitting just behind the family, behind Catherine and Joe Jackson and Tito, and then in front of them, LaToya, his sister, and Randy, his brother. Now, just as the clerk is about to read the verdicts, all the kids reached around. Tito had his arm around his mother. LaToya reached her hand around. They all were touching Catherine Jackson, Michael's mother. She started to break. As soon as they heard the first not guilty, she broke down and started to cry. They all kept sort of grabbing her and holding her. And from that point on, really, there was no other sound in the courtroom other than that clerk reading those not guilty verdicts. Now, Michael Jackson, you could not see his expression. He appeared very somber, but at the end, he did turn. He hugged his attorney, Robert Sanger, then, of course, also hugged Thomas Mesereau, but it still appeared very somber. As you can see, when he was leaving, he was blowing kisses to the fans and that sort of thing. But absolutely incredible moment in the courtroom, and, of course, for his family, and for him, for what they've been going through for the past few months.
Walking out, the family did not, by any stretch of the imagination, raise their hands
No.
up. There wasn't a sense of jubilation. Was there any of that, any celebration? celebration in
There
court?
was no celebration. And of course, the judge cautioned everyone in the beginning, because the public is in the courtroom as well, do not show any signs of either unhappiness or jubilation with those verdicts. And as they were read, the family, as I said, all they did was they really showed how they felt by touching each other. And, you know, and although Michael's father, Joe Jackson, kept his hands clasped and stared straight forward through the whole time the verdicts were being read. As we walked outside of the courtroom, the and sisters were there. Jermaine was there, as well as Janet Jackson were there to greet the family as soon as they came out of the courtroom.
What about the jurors? Did they make eye contact with Jackson walking in, or did you see anything from them?
You couldn't. Jackson was looking directly at the jurors as they walked in. He seemed to be nodding somewhat, thanking them as they left, but the jurors seemed more conscious of acknowledging the alternates that were also there. All the alternates, all 8 alternates, were also in the courtroom at the time. But Jackson, as I said, very somber, very, as he has been through much of this trial. It's been very difficult to read his emotions, but certainly after he hugged his attorneys, you could see there was definitely some relief on his part.
What about Tom Sneddon, who had so much invested in this case, the man that decided to go forward despite the inadequacies, if you will, with the accuser and the accuser's family? Anything from him?
Nothing. It was when the prosecutors came in, they seemed very upbeat. When they initially came in, they were talking, back for a lot of smiling, that sort of thing, which contrasted really with when Tom Mesereau walked in with Michael Jackson. The two of them sat there in the courtroom staring straight ahead for maybe 10, 15 minutes before the judge and the jury came in, whereas the prosecutors had been talking with one another and smiling, that sort of thing. After the verdict was announced, just very grim-faced. They weren't looking at each other, just very grim face after hearing, because once you heard those first 2 counts, it was very clear where this jury was going.
Incredible. All right, Rusty Dornat inside the courtroom. Wolf?
All right, I just want to bring Rusty back. If Rusty can hear me, can she hear me, Ted?
Yeah, she can hear you.
Rusty, tell our viewers once again, and you were sitting inside the courtroom, the immediate reaction from Michael Jackson once that first count was read and the verdict was not guilty. You just recap briefly what you saw.
You cannot see. He keeps his face very straight towards the front of the room. He does not look from side to side. He did not appear to look at the jury after that first count was read, because the clerk who was reading them was on the other side of the courtroom. So you did not see him move. He appeared to be very somber. But the family, as I said, who was sitting directly in front of me, the relief on their part was immediately apparent. They were holding their mother, Catherine. They were touching her. Just an immediate sort of sigh of relief within the shoulders. They were the ones that you could really see some kind of reaction. But as far as Jackson was concerned, you could not see even any kind of sigh or anything like that. He just appeared straightforward the entire time all of the verdicts were being read. Wolf?
Well, and there was no audible, there's no noise, no cheering, no thank gods, no nothing like that. Everybody was totally silent as all 10 counts were read?
That's correct, because the judge had made such a strict admonishment that if any signs of jubilation were shown, that he would throw those people out of the courtroom. So everyone was very conscious of how they should behave in court, and there was really no audible or reaction within the courtroom when he began reading those counts, or the clerk when she began reading the counts.
And what about when the whole thing was over and the judge dismissed the jury? Were there cheers from the Jackson team and from Michael Jackson himself?
No, still no cheers. The first person he turned to was Robert Sanger to the left and gave him a very, very sort of mild hug. He then turned to Thomas Mesereau, who was on his right, also gave him a hug. The family stood up. They sort of all touched each other once again, and then they demanded, the court demanded that the media leave the courtroom. So at that point, I could not see the family actually interact with Michael Jackson when he was coming out of that courtroom area.
We just saw Thomas Mesereau, Rusty, and Ted get into a vehicle. Do we have any idea where he's going, what he's about to do? Because I anticipated he might be getting ready to make a statement to the press.
Yeah, we definitely anticipated something from the defense, especially if they came out victorious. They've been very tight-lipped throughout this, and we did it expect that they would do something, make some sort of statement. Whether that comes now in the next day or next few hours, I'm sure they're celebrating.
But it's difficult, as you know, because Michael Jackson's representative, who was speaking to the press, is no longer working for Michael Jackson. So we're kind of unsure of how we're going to be receiving word of this, right, Ted? I mean, whether is it going to come through the defense team? Or?
Right. Thomas Mesereau is a reserved man who is very skeptical of the media, and it seems as though the Jackson family, Mesereau, the defense team, is acting as though they have been vindicated, yes, but not pleased that this ever happened in the first place. And that's really been, at least Mesereau's attitude throughout this entire trial: come in, work hard, and almost in a way that he seemed upset that he had to be there.
It was interesting, too, that Joe Jackson, Michael's father, when he came in, he walked very slowly into the courtroom, and he looked at each and every member of the press that was sitting in all the outside, sort of trying to get the people's faces and think, you know, if I'm going to remember you. That was sort of the feeling you got, because he was so studied as he did it and walked so slowly and looked at each person in each row thinking, you know, and it was the feeling of, I'm going to remember you no matter what happens in this case.
And
we see
Joe
the motorcade,
Jackson
Ted, hold on one second, Ted. The motorcade, this vehicle, this black vehicle, is heading back, we assume, to the Neverland Ranch, carrying Michael Jackson, a very elated Michael Jackson, not guilty on all 10 counts, read by the clerk just a little while ago. Very, very emotional moment for him, for his family, for all of his fans who were watching this jury and the deliberation. Ted Rowlands, and let me bring Rusty back for a moment. When the jury walked in, all 12 members, 8 women, 4 men, Rusty, did they make eye contact based on what you could tell with Michael Jackson going in to the announcement of the verdicts?
They seemed to, when they came in, they seemed to just take their seats. And as I said, they made eye contact with the alternates who were in the front row, because I saw one of the jurors wave at one of the alternates, and I saw one of the alternates who were sitting in the front row also wave at one of the jurors. Now, while the verdicts were being read, they did not look at Michael Jackson. They appeared to be looking right at the court clerk as she was reading. They did not appear to be looking at her. And I don't know if you heard, actually, the statement that apparently the jury made. I'm not sure if that came out on the audio.
No, we have not heard that. We have not heard that.
Okay.
But why don't you tell us? The only thing we heard, Rusty, and I want to make sure you know, the only thing we heard were the verdicts on the 10 counts read by the clerk. We didn't hear anything else.
Right. Well, they just talked about that they believe that this, hang on one second, I'm going to put my glasses on to read some of this, that they believe that it was the testament to the belief in the justice system and the truth. And this is not all verbatim. I was taking this very quickly. But they also requested to return to their they came out of their lives anonymously. They requested that they return to their lives anonymously. But they did want the judge to read this, that they felt that this entire procedure was a testament to their belief in the justice system and the truth. Now, the judge did go on to say that they were allowed to talk to anyone they wanted to, and that he actually urged them to talk, that he thought it was a good idea.
Right now it is.
Also, perhaps the defense
That's
or
from Nancy
prosecutors
Baker of Larry King.
Finn, F-I-N-S-U.
encourage them to talk to them, and of course, and talk to the media as well.
Wolf,
Rusty,
we just...
yeah, go ahead, Ted.
We just received a statement from Debbie Rowe, the mother of 2 of Michael Jackson's children, who was brought here and testified for the prosecution in this case. And many believe that that was one of the moments where the prosecution really, they seemed to be stunned by what Debbie Rowe had to say, because although she was a prosecution witness, she got up there and basically said that Michael Jackson was a wonderful father. Debbie Rowe is saying, quote, "Debbie is overjoyed that the justice system really works, regardless of which side called her to testify at the trial." That from Iris Finsilver, Debbie Rowe's attorney. One of the moments in this trial, Debbie Rowe's testimony, where people were literally scratching their heads saying, why was this witness called for the prosecution? Whether Debbie Rowe laid in wait and was a torpedo of sorts, doing it on purpose, or if it was she was not vetted out, we'll never know. But obviously she's weighing in now that she believes justice has been done.
Also, Wolf, I just did want to add that I had...
Our viewers, Rusty, just to remind our viewers, because I know you were there together with Ted for virtually every step of the way, Debbie Rowe was called the the ex-wife of Michael Jackson, the mother of two of his children. Debbie Rowe was called to testify on behalf of the prosecution, but what she said widely interpreted as helping Michael Jackson. The defense, given the loving nature of what she had to say about Michael Jackson.
And keep in mind, Wolf, that if Michael Jackson would have been found guilty, Debbie Rowe would have taken custody of the children, and she is currently in a custody fight with Michael Jackson for those children. So people were blown away by her testimony. It was so supportive of Jackson on the stand, and now, with the verdict in, again, she is showing her support, saying she's overjoyed.
Yeah, Wolf, I just wanted to add one thing that I didn't tell you about the jury statement, which was interesting, too, is they also said that we, the jury, have had the weight of the world on our shoulders, while we were making this decision, but we did it studiously and meticulously, that they studied the evidence, that they didn't want anyone to think that this was just some slam-bam thing, that they went through, they feel, every piece of evidence and really looked at it before they made that decision. So that was part of their statement that they released as well.
So, Rusty, based on the statement that was read on behalf of the 12 members of the jury, did you get the sense they would be making individual statements, speaking to the news media, or that was it?
Well, what happened is the judge told them that the representative for the media, Peter Chaplin, who's been the pool producer here, was going to go back with them and talk to them for about 2 minutes to tell them what to expect, which Peter Chaplin also did in the Peterson trial, just talk to the jurors, say, look, they don't bite. They just want to ask you a few questions. If you want to do it, we're happy to have you stay. If you don't want to do it, there's a place to go and you don't have to, and you can go home. So that's what he was doing right now. We'll have to see who actually shows up in that jury room for this jury press conference. We'll have to see who really does want to talk.
Our cameras, Rusty, did catch, and Ted, I want you to weigh on this as well. Thomas Sneddon, the prosecutor, he was one of the first to get out of that courtroom after the verdicts were read. Here's a picture of him sort of bolting. There he is right there in the middle of the screen. He was basically one of the first to get out of there. This is not a good day, Ted, for him.
No, you can really see the grim faces, can't you, on the prosecution team?
Yeah, and all the way until this point here, that was all prosecution representatives. In fact, you still had one more coming out there. A lot of members of the prosecution team in court today, and they have been throughout, and they have put their heart and soul into this. They truly believe, they have a case, and they truly believe that the individual that they were going after, Michael Jackson, was indeed worthy of their attention and their hard work. They did work hard in their case, but I think clearly, for those of us who have been in this courtroom day after day after day, it makes sense. This verdict does when you analyze the victim's family. The J.C. Penney case, I think, is all you have to say, because what was proven in this case as fact by Thomas Mesereau is that this family had inconsistencies before in a very similar attitude, and I'm sure when we hear from jurors that will be a big factor.
I think there was the credibility issue, and when they went back to that jury room, reasonable doubt was just enough to sway them. But I mean, again, the prosecutors were incredible. I mean, their questioning was so dramatic at times. Yes.
I'm going to interrupt. Reverend Jesse Jackson's on the phone. He's been counseling, ministering to Michael Jackson. He's become an unofficial spokesman, I think we can say, for Michael Jackson. Give us your reaction, Reverend Jackson.
Well, it was a painful process and stressful at the very end. Michael called me this morning, and we talked and prayed as we often do, and he will call back again later this afternoon. But this has been an excruciating process. The time that the sheriff went into his home, in some sense invaded, occupied, and confiscated materials that ended up in the newsroom and in the courtroom. And kind of two trials at the same time, a courtroom trial and a newsroom trial, and he was tried and convicted in many newsrooms or many TV shows. And since it's not a sequestered jury, one did not know its impact upon the jury. The jury had the capacity in the end to discern innuendo and suggestion from fact. The accusers made some very, very strong charges, but each time on the cross-examination, they wilted. There's always a stench of some material which weakened their credibility. The jury has spoken, and I hope that many lessons will be learned from this. The healing process must begin. Michael must assess the impact of the very impropriety of these problems that got him in this trouble. And we hope that all those involved now will learn a lesson, that we will go to another stage.
Were you expecting this not guilty verdict, Reverend Jackson, or were you bracing for guilty?
I was bracing for either, in the sense that if the trial used the standard of reasonable doubt, he would be acquitted. But then oftentimes juries use political standards, not reasonable doubt standards, and there was a highly charged political environment in which all of this took place. I mean, the sheriff was unrelenting. He was not on the gag order. The DA was unrelenting. The judge gave them generous latitude to make their case over and over again. There were no personal African Americans on the jury.
Reverend Jack.
Hold on one second. I think we're breaking up. Reverend Jackson, I think our line may be breaking up. I don't know if you want to repeat that last thought, if you can still hear me. I think we've just lost Reverend Jackson. We're gonna try to reconnect with Reverend Jackson. Jesse Jackson on the phone with us has spent a lot of time in recent weeks with Michael Jackson, serving as an unofficial spokesman, ministering to him as well in these very, very difficult days, weeks leading up to this not guilty verdict on all 10 counts. I think the Reverend Al Sharpton is with us as well on the phone. Reverend Sharpton, are you there?
I'm here.
All right,
I'm in your studio.
You're in our studios in New York. Reverend Sharpton, give us your reaction.
Well, I think, you know, in 2002 when Michael Jackson came to New York and we hosted him, we were castigated when he started saying that he felt they were coming after him because he raised questions about his owning the Beatles catalog and others. I think that this is a vindication for people that believe that people are innocent until proven guilty. And I think that there are no winners here. I don't think there's no reason for Michael or those opposing Michael to gloat. There's a lot of pain, a lot of hurt here. Children have been dragged into court. Michael's reputation has been damaged severely. But I think the criminal justice system worked this time. I think we can say that this jury, despite being inundated by media, despite the fact they were not sequestered, despite the fact there were questionable rulings by the judge, this jury said the evidence wasn't there and they acquitted him. I think this is good for America. And I don't think any of us that went on the line saying that Michael deserved the same right as any citizen are celebrating tonight anything other than the fact that people should have the right to be proven guilty of a crime, even if we disagree with their lifestyle.
Reverend
and that's what
Sharpton,
happened today.
Were you among those African-American leaders in this country who expressed concern that were no African-American members on the jury?
Yes, I did. I expressed that concern, and I've expressed concern of what was behind this. A lot of people in the music industry that claimed that for years there were things going on. They never said that, while Michael was not talking back or not raising questions as he did when he came to our headquarters in Harlem. And I felt that he was being vilified and in many ways lynched by the media. I think today showed that there can be a speck of grass grow even through concrete, and that people are going to be balanced and fair if given the opportunity. I think that they showed tremendous courage. Those 12 jurors who may go into a community that disagrees with them, some of them vehemently, but they upheld the best in the American jurisprudence system by saying if the evidence wasn't there, despite whatever biases I may or may not have, I'm not going to use the system to make a statement. I'm going to use the system to convict people if they're guilty of a crime.
Jeffrey Toobin is here with me. Reverend Sharpton, our senior legal analyst, has a question for you.
Reverend Sharpton, do you think, and Michael Jackson has said that he thinks it's appropriate for him to sleep in the same bed as boys who are 12, 13 years old. Do you think he ought to stop doing that?
I think that Michael now can have time to reflect and think a lot of deliberate moves as he goes forward. The question is, Jeffrey, that whether or not it was a crime for him to say that. Whatever my feelings, I talked to Michael. I've been to Neverland. And I've had advice for Michael, pro and con. The issue here was not my advice as a minister or even as a man. The issue here was whether he committed a crime. That should be proven. Otherwise, it would set a precedent that anyone could make an accusation against any public figure, and we'd be thrown into jail or convicted just based on media hysteria rather than hard evidence. That's what was frightening to me about the condition of this trial.
I want you to stand by, Reverend Sharpton. Stephen Clark is with us from Mountain View, California, a former prosecutor, now a criminal defense attorney. He's been inside that courtroom. He's been watching this case. Stephen Clark, give us your reaction. How surprised, if you were surprised, were you?
Well, actually, I wasn't surprised on many of the counts being not guilty. Frankly, after watching the prosecution's case in court, there left a lot to be desired, and there clearly was reasonable doubt. I thought that the jury may hang on two of the more serious child molest counts that the young boy described. And the reason I say that is because the prior act's evidence was quite compelling as to two of the young boys, and I thought that the jury, that some members of that jury may say, look, Michael Jackson's a pedophile, and I'm going to give the prosecution a chance to get this right next time. But frankly, the conspiracy count was an anchor around the prosecution's case. They made a serious strategic mistake bringing it in the first place, and I think that's really what happened here. The jury just said, look, I'm not going to give the mother and the accuser the keys to Michael Jackson's bank account in this situation. They were disliked. So I think that conspiracy count was a big mistake. And I'm frankly a little surprised that there weren't some jurors that felt that he did molest the young boy. But I'm not surprised on the other counts being not guilty.
Stephen Clark, the bottom line, though, and I think you can boil it down to this, is that jury simply did not believe the accuser, who was 13 years old and is now 16 years old. They simply didn't believe this young man.
Well, there was certainly enough doubt as to his testimony. They may believe him, and I'm not sure that when they do finally speak, they're going to say, we think Michael Jackson is without fault in this situation. I think that clearly they would say, he's got a lot of personal problems. He shouldn't be sleeping in bed. Maybe he did this, but frankly, on the basis of this boy's testimony, when you look at the reasonable doubt standard, before you put somebody in jail, that's the standard you have. I think they just said, look, we cannot believe him beyond a reasonable doubt. When you look at the other evidence that called into question his credibility, and particularly the influence that the mother apparently had on him over prior occasions in that JCPenney case. So they may have believed him in the sense of sitting around and discussing it at a cocktail party, but when you look at that reasonable doubt standard, they had to go in favor of the defense unless they were convinced beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm
going to have you stand by, Stephen, as well. Deborah Opry is standing by. She's in Santa Maria outside the courthouse, a spokeswoman for the Michael Jackson family, for the Michael Jackson team. Deborah, give us your reaction.
Are we ready here, guys? I am not shocked. I expected it. Did I cry? Yeah. Am I going to cry again? Yeah. After a year, the stress is just melting away, and I'm so happy for Catherine, Joe, Michael, LaToya, Janet, Tito, Jackie, Jermaine, and Randy. What a family, and what a jury, and what an attorney, and Tom Mesereau and his crew. I'm
Deborah,
so
did
proud
you have a
tonight.
chance? Did you have a chance to speak with Michael since the not guilty verdicts were announced?
I spoke with the family as they were exiting, and they're all very happy and very relieved. And I have to make sure.
Did they tell you, Deborah, what their game plan is now? Are they going to make a statement? Will we hear from Michael?
Their game plan was to get into the SUVs and go home.
And just to relax and to absorb what has happened. When you say you weren't surprised, you have to admit you were a little surprised, Deborah, weren't you?
No. I expected the acquittal. The media pundits are, they have their own courtroom, the courtroom of public opinion. It's not fair, it's not right, and I took this cause on because I believe the jury trial should be in a courtroom.
Deborah, give us one additional thought right now as you look back on these 14 weeks of the trial. What was the biggest mistake from your perspective that the prosecution made?
They brought charges against Michael Jackson with the wrong accuser.
He was not credible, is that what you're saying, the young boy?
That's absolutely what I'm saying.
All right, Deborah Opry is an attorney for the Jackson family, spending a few moments as well. Thomas Snedden is the prosecutor. He's speaking right now.
And I've been a prosecutor for 37 years, and 37 years I've never quarreled with a jury's verdict, and I'm not going to start today. So basically, that's all we really have to say. I'll answer a few questions, but I'm probably not going to remain too long. So if anybody has a question far away,
I think we're going to start
we'll
over
see how
here.
it goes.
Can you hear me okay?
I certainly
All right.
can.
Have you spoken with the accuser and his family, and if so, what was their mood and the reaction to the verdict today?
No, as to all.
Address the defense's allegation throughout the trial that you rushed into this prosecution because of your past history with Mr. Jackson.
My past history of Mr. Jackson had absolutely, unequivocally, nothing to do with our evaluation of this particular case. That's been a nice little 30-second soundbite that the media has used to try to justify this thing, but it had never had anything to do with either the sheriff's investigation or our decision to file.
Can you address the fans' claim that the Santa Barbara DA was somehow trying to frame Michael Jackson, and all of this really is an elaborate scheme to frame Michael Jackson and make him look guilty?
I just answered that question.
Mr. Snedden, in retrospect, do you think you had the wrong family on the stand?
I don't know how much work you do in the criminal justice system, but the system I worked in for 37 years is that people come in and they're the victims of crime. We don't select our victims, and we don't select the families they come from. What we do is we evaluate the case. We try to make a conscientious decision as to whether or not we have enough evidence to go forward. And that's what we did in this case. We've done it in every other case since I've been the district attorney in this county, and we will continue to do that as long as I'm district attorney of this county.
You stand by what the family said in court?
I think that's evident.
There have been a lot of claims that because of the gag order, you haven't been able to address. I mean, fans have, even Jackson's mother has said that you have some involvement with the Ku Klux Klan. Fans have claimed that you have relatives who are among the witnesses. Do you want to address any of those now that you finally can?
They're all false. We all did our job. We did it conscientiously. And anybody who knows Tom Snedden, knows Gordon Auchincloss, and knows Ron Zonin, and the things that we've done in our community and the families that we have, knows all of that to be untrue. And if people would simply take the time to investigate the allegation before they print it, they'd know it's untrue also.
Have you looked into, and do you have concerns of reports that at least one of the jurors was peddling a book deal?
I had heard that.
You had heard that?
Yes.
And did you have concerns about that? And was it looked into?
Let's just say that it was taken care of by the court.
Would you reflect for just one moment on the conspiracy charge? Do you think that it might have been a better case without conspiracy, only child molestation?
I've learned a very expensive lesson in life a long time ago. That is, you never look back, you always look forward.
Tom, is this the end of your office pursuing Michael Jackson?
No comment.
What do you do now?
I don't think you want to know. I've been told not to crack any jokes, so we go back to work. We got a lot of cases that have been pending. I have an office to run. We're having budget hearings today. We're professionals, and we'll continue to act as professionals the way we act professionally in this case. And I'm not going to look back and apologize for anything we've done. We did a very conscientious, thorough job, as did the Sheriff's Department, in investigating this case.
Would you answer the question whether witnesses that you put on the stand surprised you when they testified?
I mean, I'm not going to get into the trial. I just say that the experience of any trial lawyer like Gordon or Ron or anybody in my office, for that matter, who tries felonies is you never have a case where a witness, you don't get some surprises on both sides in both ways. And I think Mr. Mesereau would tell you the same thing. And that's a product of being a trial lawyer, and you learn to adjust and you go on.
Why did you go ahead with the case when you knew the mother in particular to be such a troublesome witness?
I don't think the media generally understands the responsibility of a prosecutor. And I'll answer it this way, and the simple thing is, when a victim comes in and the victim tells you they've been victimized, and you believe that, and you believe that the evidence supports that, you don't look at their pedigree. We look at what we think is what's right. You do the right things for the right reasons. If it doesn't work out, that's why we have a jury system. But we did the right thing for the right reasons.
Do you have any problem with the judge reading the jury notes privately without releasing to the media last Friday and having that
Listen, the judge is the judge. He has the prerogative to do and run his court the way he wants. I have no criticism of the judge.
Do you think that's constitutional and you don't have any problem with that?
You know, Greta, I just, you know, the judge has done what he's done, and that's the way we have to live with what, as you know, what the judge does. I have no criticism of the judge whatsoever, none.
Tom, if there were pivotal moments in the trial when you thought it was going one way or the other, what were they?
I didn't think there were any.
Mr. Snedden?
I didn't. I just that the case
if you
went on.
If someone came to you now with strong allegations of molestation on the part of Michael Jackson, what would you do?
We'd review it like any other case we review in our office, just like we reviewed this one.
You wouldn't shy from it now?
Well, the answer to the question, truthfully, is I probably wouldn't if it was a good case. But I think we all learned some lessons here that we thought we had a good case this time. And we thought we did a conscientious job, and the Sheriff's Department did a remarkable job of investigating it. But no, the people in this county elected me to do a job, and I've tried to do that conscientiously. And I'll continue to do that the same way.
Child molester has escaped unpunished?
No comment. Okay?
Do you hope that Mr. Jackson leaves Santa Barbara County?
No comment.
Can I assessment of the defense team and how they did in this trial?
I absolutely have no comment about that.
Do you have any estimate on the cost?
No.
You mentioned you'd learned some lessons. What lessons have you learned?
Well, I was referring probably more than anything else to the celebrity factor.
Can you elaborate?
I'm not the Lone Ranger in that faction.
Why does it take so long to try this case?
Actually, I thought the case went pretty fast, considering what the original estimates were. We were in trial for February, March, April, May.
So you don't think trials seem to take a little longer in California than...
Well, they definitely take a lot longer than they do in the South.
I'll give you that one.
Well.
Tom, when you walked into the courtroom, did you have an inkling what the verdict was?
No.
No?
We obviously had our aspirations, but certainly I had no inkling.
You mentioned the celebrity factor. Do you think that's played a key part?
Well, it seems to us it would, but maybe we're just looking for explanations in the wrong places. I don't know. Okay, any other questions? If you don't, we have some unfinished business. All right, thank you very much.
District Attorney Thomas Snedden Jr. speaking to reporters after a California jury acquitted Michael Jackson of all 10 counts against him at the conclusion of his 4-month trial on child molestation charges. Hello and welcome. I'm Jonathan Mann. We're breaking away now from CNN's U.S. network to